Hello everyone, this is Clifford Kian from Peas and Chips Productions. Welcome back to my Unreal Engine game creation breakdown series, where we'll be breaking down the making of a game from initial concept to final product, using my recently created game, USEU Arena, as an example. The previous video covered the importance of identifying the key ideas in your game concept and writing it down, the role of prototyping, and the importance of prototyping quickly. In today's video, I will start prototyping my VR shooter game in Unreal Engine, starting from the Unreal Engine VR template, and then modifying it to add some basic controller movement. So, let's get started. Open Unreal and launch it. The version that I'm using is 4.24.3. Create a new project sitting under Games, under the Games category. Select Virtual Reality. Leave the project settings as is, and this will be a blueprint project. And let's give it a name. I'm going to call mine VR Shooter Prototype. Once you have given it a name, simply click the Create Project button. Now that it's creating the project, you might as well go for a cup of tea because this is going to take a while. But we will cut ahead to the actual loading of the template. Once the template's open, you can open up a different map called the Motion Controller map. The template offers a few maps. Motion Controller 1 provides hand motion. Set it to VR preview and press play. And you can see it's given us some hand motion controllers. It's given us the HMD so we can look around. And it has also given us the ability to teleport within this level. This template unfortunately does not provide us with the basic movement that we actually want to test within our prototype. So we're going to have to create that ourselves. So just looking at what the template offers as well, we have our VR pawn, and it is made from the motion controller pawn. So that is the object that we are actually going to modify. We're also going to just check the input settings. So if you go to Edit and Project Settings, in the left-hand panel, there will be an input option. And this allows you to map your inputs from your controllers to events within your game. So we're just going to check under access methods, and you'll see there that already the access, which is your thumb controllers on your controller, have already been mapped and given names. So the name of this event, for example, is the motion controller thumb left Y. That's for the Y axis, and there will also be motion controller thumb left X, which will be the X component, or the left to right component of the motion controller. Now we're going to edit the motion controller pawn, and we're going to add these events to the pawn. Opening up the event graph, we will then add these events. Now the event graph is the only place that you can actually add events, so you can't add this directly to a function. We're now going to add the event to our event graph. We do that by right-clicking onto the event graph and then doing a search. You can also add custom events to the event graph at this point, but we're not going to create a custom event here. We're going to use the existing events that was created in the project settings. So we're going to search for a motion controller from left Y and add it to the event graph. And we're also going to basically add the other events, motion controller thumb left X, which is, and the left to right motion of the controller. And then we're also going to add motion controller thumb right Y and motion controller thumb right X. So these have been mapped to the thumbsticks, little thumbstick controllers that you find on the controller. We're also going to then store these values into their own variables. Now they are floats, so we're going to create a new variable called float and basically call it left Y, left X, and right Y and right X, and map the values that the thumb controllers provide, the access values to these variables. So let's just speed that up and set these variables. You just drag the variable created to and set it to a set and tell it to execute and map the value to the variable, and do that respectively for thumb left, thumb X, thumb right Y, and thumb right X as well. And if you want to, you can add a little comment just to remind you and to find these events easily. Now we've mapped our controller values for our thumbsticks to a set of variables. I'm now just going to the event tick, which is the event that gets executed basically every frame depending on your settings. In this case, it's going to be every frame. I'm just going to add a placeholder function that's going to update the movement every frame. So it's basically what we're going to do is we're going to use the values that we've captured from the motion controllers, and we are going to use those values every frame to check which direction our character should be moving. Make sure it's compiled and saved. Right, now that we've opened up the function, what I'm going to do is just print out one of the values that we're actually capturing. And we're going to print this out essentially every frame, just to see what is actually happening and what sort of values it gives to us. We're going to use the print string function. This is purely for debugging purposes, and actually only gets shown in your development version of your game. If you build it to release, this one actually doesn't execute as such, or doesn't perform anything. We're only going to print it to the screen. We don't want to print it to a log, because we don't need it to write to file. And now we press play, and we can see these values being written on the left hand side. It starts off at 0, and if you push it backwards, you see it goes to minus 0.9. I'm not sure if you can read that, but when you push it forward, it goes into positive 0.999. Essentially, dead center should be 0, pushing it forward as far as possible becomes 0.99, and pushing it as far back as you can is negative 0.99. So I'm just going to modify the template slightly. So we're going to add a capsule collision component, and we're going to setting that to the root of the pawn. This is so that we can provide physics motion to our pawn. We're going to create a variable called speed. Just compile it. It's a float value, and we're going to give it a value of something around about 500. The speed value will be the maximum speed that our character will be able to move at. Now we need to work out what direction we're actually going to be moving in. So I'm going to take that the forward motion is where I am actually looking. So which I think makes intuitive sense, so that you move in the direction that you're looking. So if you press forward, if you're looking forward, you'll move forward. So by getting the forward vector of the camera, this will be the exact direction that you are looking forward itself. And we're then going to multiply this forward vector by the amount that we have actually pressed forward. We're now going to add the right vector. Now you can imagine this is a direction that is 90 degrees to the forward vector, and is, if you can imagine a point starting from your ear and moving 90 degrees outwards from your ear, that would be that vector. We're going to multiply that by the left axis value that you get from your thumb controller. So that'd be the amount of left proportion that that your thumb controller is sticking out there. We then take these two vectors and then we add them together. This gives us a relative amount of how much forward you're moving in your controller and how much right you're moving in your controller. So if you're putting 45 degrees relative to where you're looking, it's got a equal proportion of left and equal proportion right, and which will end up with a final vector of being 45 degrees to where you're actually looking. We're also going to break this vector up into its separate components, because I'm actually not interested in the Z portions of where my camera is actually looking, because you can be looking slightly upwards and slightly to the right. But we're almost working on a flat plane for basic motion. So I'm going to just treat this as having zero angle in the up and down direction. So I'm going to normalize this to make this a unit vector, and so this purely gives us a direction now, a proportionate direction in which we are looking at, and the amount that our controller has been pushed in those directions. And then we're going to multiply that by our speed that we're actually going to be moving at. One of the reasons for actually just simply multiplying it by speed is now that we've simply got a direction vector, and we're moving in that direction at this particular speed, is that it helps with against motion sickness, because you need instantaneous motion. I have found that acceleration is not great for motion sickness. Now we're going to add our capsule, and we're going to it's going to be a physics capsule. So there is a node called set linear set physics linear velocity, and you simply supply that with a vector. So we're going to add that vector that we've calculated, and we are then going to execute that. I'm going to do some quick tidying up here, but we'll speed that up. Right. Now, before the capsule will actually act like a physics object, we'll need to tell it to simulate physics. So in the right-hand portion there under physics, we tell it, yes, we're going to simulate physics. I'm not interested in gravity because I essentially want to move on a plane. And to ensure that, I'm going to add some constraints. So I'm going to lock the positions in the Z plane, so my object won't be able to move up or down. Then I'm also going to lock the X and Y rotations, so I don't flip over forward or sideways, which would probably be a little tricky. So let's test that. There we go, pushing forward, pushing backwards, and I'm able to go left and right and change my direction as I'm looking. So this is purely a forward, backwards, and strafe sort of motion. We haven't actually added any rotation yet. So the rotation that you saw in that previous video was purely me changing the direction that I'm looking at. And the next portion that I'm just going to add a function there to sort of clean up the code just a little bit. So this function is purely going to output a linear velocity based on my controller, which I've already written. Here I set the node as being a pure node, and a pure node allows this function to be executed without directly connecting an execute connector to the actual function. And here we're going to copy the code that we had already created, and because it doesn't require any parameters or inputs, external inputs, we can simply cut and paste it, and the final velocity we're going to execute connect to the output of this function. So it simply makes this function a little bit more readable. So we're going to just simply add that function back in as a replacement for that larger chunk of code, and reinsert the velocity into it there. So it becomes a little bit neater. We can see what its function by the name, what it actually performs. Thank you for watching today's video covering the start of the VR Shooter prototype, where we started with the Unreal Engine's VR template and modified it to include basic movement. The next video will cover the addition of snap turning or rotation to the prototype, as well as the creation of a basic bullet. So, don't forget to like and subscribe to continue on our journey on building this prototype. See you then!